lawyers. And he says, Your Honor, you have to throw her case out because if you let it proceed, there could be millions or billions of dollars in other damages. The lawyers know. Millions or billions, and no kidding. These dots here, this is Alberta, this is British Columbia. These are the leaking wells reported. The companies don't even have to report all their leaks. And that's just to 2014. Over 3,000 wells leaking, 3,300. The Oil and Gas Industry Lobby Group did a massive one-page ad in our big paper, and they even admitted in this ad they were trying to deflect by saying, oh, but that was shallow fracking. They do that here too. Oh, we won't do what we did in Alberta. We're going to do only deep fracking here. They're going to frack shallow here. But he says, oh yeah, the coal bed methane fracking did contaminate water sometimes, in the more infamous cases where the water could be set on fire. So this is 2014. It's 2017 now. I still have no regulatory action. Then in the fall of 2014, I had appealed Justice Whitman's terrible decision. They rule against me. I'm ordered to pay the regulators' legal fees. When environmental groups take agencies to court and lose, the judges hardly ever make them pay legal fees because they say, well, your case is clearly in the public interest. Mine is too. I just happen to be an individual doing what nobody in Canada will do. None of the environmental groups will help. None of the environmental groups will take responsible action on fracking, and none of the regulators will either. And yet the judges are making me pay the legal fees, even though my case is clearly in the public interest. So I file leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. I was never expecting to see justice in Alberta. It's a petrostate. But I was expecting to see justice from the Supreme Court of Canada. They are fracking the cap rock across Alberta. This is bitumen. They are injecting by hydraulic fracturing steam. Same method. And the bitumen is oozing to surface far from the wellbore. They have a massive problem in northeast Alberta. Massive. Not only that, oh dear, can't read that, it's in red. Fresh groundwater has been proven contaminated 10 kilometers away from that.
Looks like your red gun is missing off the projector.
Yeah, I have those on the screen and on my laptop in red, but they're not showing. They're showing as either nothing or blue. Some of them are blue, but you can't see it. Sorry about that. I never thought to check the colors. In Calmar, Alberta, gas has been migrating into a schoolyard, bubbling up in the schoolyard, and near homes. They had to demolish 5 homes. There's a lawsuit on this. And they went in to fix the leaks and couldn't. 51% of the new shale gas wells in Quebec are leaking. The regulator ordered the companies to go in and fix them. They all failed. And those wells weren't even fracked yet. That was just from drilling. Fracking kills. Jack Sean Isles was killed in northeast BC directly by fracking. Not an explosion as we usually think, but an explosion or sudden release of extremely high pressure. There's Jack, young man. The Supreme Court of Canada agrees to hear my case. They only hear 4% of civil cases. And then University of Calgary, oil industry controlled University of Calgary, law prof Alice Woolley takes her paper from 8 years previous and it gets published in the Journal of Energy and Natural Resources Law. Why? Was this because I was now before the Supreme Court of Canada and the defendants wanted me smeared as a terrorist? To the judges. My lawyers told me they believed the regulator named me a terrorist in their official legal brief in 2012. They even said that they didn't have to protect my charter rights if I'm a terrorist. My lawyers believe they did that to smear all future judges against me. Most of what's happened since I began speaking out has been terrible, other than, of course, coming here to Ireland and falling in love with the Irish. I have. But one amazing thing happened. This is my property here. This is the hamlet of Rosebud. It's very pretty. Most of the people tried to silence me, to stop me. I've had the most horrible abuse to me has happened from ordinary people. I have compassion for it and understanding, as angry as I would get because they're afraid. They got promised $150,000. They don't like the idea of somebody rocking the oil and gas industry boat. Their sons work in the industry. It's been horrible. But one woman came to me and said, Jess, we want to send a petition to the Supreme Court of Canada in support of your case. I couldn't believe it. And she also wanted me to walk door to door with her to get the signatures to answer the community's questions. It just about broke me because they were so supportive. These cases will never be won in the courts. The courts have been fracked, they're too corrupt. Where we win this, like I'm gonna keep going, but where we win this is in the community. Where you win it is in the community. The Supreme Court hears my case. Now remember, this is just a preliminary motion on whether I can sue the regulator or not. At this point, no evidence has been filed in court. It's just them lawyers arguing about stuffy law. I didn't go, because I was so stressed by this time I thought I'd faint in the hearing, and I didn't want to spend $2,000 to fly to Ottawa, and just was so exhausted I couldn't cope with it, so I didn't go. A little recap on Stephen Harper. He created the anti-terrorist squad of those police who came to harass me. He appointed the first case management judge on my case. He demoted Justice Neil Whitman from the Court of Appeal down to the Court of Queen's Bench, who then volunteered. He promoted Justice Veltois to yank her off my case, and he appointed 7 of the 9 Supreme Court justices. How would my case stand today if Canadians had not voted for racism, bigotry, hatred, and fear? In May, this is a very important case that I think will be copied here in the UK. This is the Redwater case. It's now before the Supreme Court of Canada, but we don't know if the court will hear the case or not. Redwater is a company that's gone bankrupt. You hear fracking makes us all rich and prosperous, brings in lots of money and jobs, we'll all be so well fed, we won't know what hit us. In Alberta, the companies are bankrupting like flies, and they are running from their legal contracts. They're not paying the farmers, they are not cleaning up. What they do in Alberta is they just bankrupt the company, or they sell it off to a shadowy company of a lower stature, and the rich leave. They clean up nothing. Redwater went bankrupt, and normally it had some assets. Normally the regulator will take the assets to pay for the cleanup. In this case, the people financing this company said, oh, no, no, no. We're getting the money. You're going to make the taxpayers pay to clean everything up. This is a horrific legal precedent. And the judge in my case ruled for the financiers of this bankrupt company and against all Albertans and our environment. This is horrific. It was appealed to the Court of Appeal in Alberta, and the company and the people lost. And in this ruling, he contradicts his ruling in my case, because we have a federal bankruptcy act that he says trumps the provincial act in Alberta. Yet in my ruling for my case, he said, oh, the charter, which even trumps the federal bankruptcy act, he said, no, no, the provincial law in Alberta trumps the charter. The waiting in my lawsuit has been absolutely horrific. It's terrible. The stress, what it's doing to me physically is, I can't even begin to describe it. The Supreme Court of Canada took a year and a day to rule on merely a preliminary matter. It's a super inconsequential matter. Does our Constitution trump the province of Alberta and their laws or not? Does it trump the energy regulator or not? Our charter was put into place by Justin Trudeau's dad to protect Canadians from precisely this type of abusive regulator or abusive politician. And many countries in the world have copied our charter. So they finally rule, and I get a non-ruling, a 4-1-4. 4 said, no, you can't sue the regulator. 4 said, yes, you can. Justice Rosalie Abella, who was named Global Jurist of the Year this year, she says, not sure yet. Yeah. And I still have a valid charter claim, but I can't do anything with it. This cost me 2 years and 2 months of my life, a massive amount of money, almost $10,000 in photocopying alone. The Supreme Court process in Canada is really sick. I was horrified by how terrible you are treated as a civil plaintiff. Lawrence Sosin was the dean. I think he's just stepping down. Dean of Osgoode Hall in Canada, most reputable law school we have. He wrote a scathing review ripping all 9 Supreme Court justices and basically summing up that what they've done has destroyed our charter. So here I am trying to protect water and our rights, and the politicians and the courts use me to destroy one of the best things Canada has. One of the things I grew up with that I was always immensely proud of and spoke about all the time. That wasn't enough. In the ruling, Justice Abella now changes the regulator finding me being a criminal to a terrorist to suddenly a vexatious litigant. Where did she get that from? She pulled it out of the air. I wasn't even a litigant at the time that the regulator banished me. It took me 2 years to find lawyers. What is the worst thing that you can be called if you're a civil plaintiff? Vexatious litigant. What it basically means is that you're just somebody who's trying to get back at somebody. You have no case, and you don't pay when you're ordered to pay costs. You don't pay the bills. You waste time. You don't show up for hearings. You don't file your briefs on time. We have done everything by the book. Every time the judges order me to pay costs, it's paid within a couple of days. And yet, I'm now called a vexatious litigant. What's nasty about this is, and why I think all 9 judges were involved on this, the world has been watching my lawsuit. The world has been asking me for help. I've spoken here in Ireland now, both sides, three times. This is my 3rd time here. And what better way to get the legal world to not listen to me and no longer watch my case? Call her a vexatious litigant. The Supreme Court sends out a summary of their rulings to the press. In the summary, they repeated this smear. It's defamation. The 4 judges that said that I could sue the regulator, they called Rosalie Abella on this. They put right in their ruling, they said, we see no basis for this. The other 4 judges were silent, but the 9 judges did not repeat what the Chief Justice of Canada put in her ruling, calling Abella on this. They didn't put that in their summary. So what did the press publish? They only published me being a vexatious litigant. Yeah, this shattered me. I could barely get out of bed for 2 months. Meanwhile, I'm watching the frac ban start to come to life in the South. Damn you guys, oops, excuse me, made me proud. Because that's community, what happened here. But this, I could barely speak to anybody. I was receiving emails. I'll never forget the email you sent me, Eddie Mitchell. But I was absolutely shattered by this. I figured for sure I was going to quit. And I think the other reason the Supreme Court did this was because they knew I'd be so humiliated and embarrassed and ashamed that I would quit. Because every time I try, every step I take, I get more battered. And the Supreme Court of Canada did exactly what the energy regulator did. Judged me without evidence and punished me. I had to pay the regulator's costs again. My water's too dangerous to even flush toilets. Here's my toilet. I use a humanure system created by a man in Pennsylvania. It's actually one of the other good things that I learned out of my lawsuit, because it's quite fantastic. I take the waste and I mix it in with straw. I get old, rotten straw from farmers. This is my new little dog, Jem. She's a Jack Russell. She's fantastic. I let this sit a year, and then I put it around my trees. Do you believe him? 0 chance of groundwater contamination. Third Energy, he wants to frack Kirby Mesperton over there in England. 0 chance. Cahill published a really important paper just right after his lie, Third Energy's little lie there. Well, it's not really a lie, but it's not a true statement either. Potentially explosive methane gas leaking from energy wells may travel extensively through groundwater and pose a safety risk. This has now been published in peer-reviewed paper. In a secret report by the energy regulator, it was made public, or sorry, it was not made public in 2017, but it was reported on in 2017. The report was dated 2016. The energy regulator now has admitted that methane is a health harm. How many of you have heard that methane's not harmful? Yeah, I was told it repeatedly. First of all, nobody's studied it to see if it is harmful or not. What I was breathing in my home, venting out of my taps, nobody's come and actually studied the health harm to the people breathing methane in their home. And ethane. This dotted line here is the acute threshold the regulator published at 10,000 parts per million. It's down here. These are wells that are leaking in cities in Alberta. I bought a beautiful sweater today in a shop in Sligo to take home, to remember you all by. So what if I walk out of that shop and somebody lights a cigarette in the street and we all ignite? This is 1 million parts per million leaking at this well. And that's the acute health threshold there. And they even admit at 1,000 parts per million, short-term effect, neurological effects. They have not made this report public. I got a copy. I believe in making things public, so I thought, well, I'm coming over here, I'll show you some photos in the report. They've got these beautiful photographs of these dangerous leaking old abandoned energy wells leaking in Alberta cities. Here's one in a parking lot. These are vehicles. Here's one by homes. This one's under an abandoned hotel. No wonder it's abandoned. And they say methane vented on the roof. Methane extraction pump. That didn't help Bruce Jack or other people in the States that have tried to vent methane. This is under an operating church. These are records from within the church. These are outside the church. It's a park near homes. In Airdrie, city of Airdrie, just north of Calgary, inside a mall, inside the new multi-billion-dollar expansion at the airport of Calgary. When I flew here, I wasn't too comfortable. I thought, well, what if this ignites and blows up? They'll blame me because I'm the terrorist. Fracking kills again. This just happened. Charles Oba, directly killed by fracking. That's Charles. And Canada had another sour gas blowout near Fox Creek, where the earthquakes are happening. This is deadly hydrogen sulfide gas. And suddenly, just recently, the regulator, who was led by an ex-Encana VP, slapped Encana with this tiny $7,000 fine. Why? I think lots of people are really angry about the Supreme Court ruling in my case and the regulator getting off. So they're trying to pretend that they're a regulator is what I think they're doing. Most of the time, the fines are nothing in Alberta. The regulator set up an emergency command post over 2 hours away. That's how dangerous this is. Hundreds, if not thousands, of vertical wells, energy wells, are being damaged by deep horizontal fracs. The energy companies over across the water in England have been telling the people there, oh no, it won't be like the fracking in Australia or America or Canada. We're only going to do the deep horizontal fracking in England. We're getting the deep horizontal fracking all over Canada. Or not all over, but where they're fracking. And that's the damages that these are causing. So what else is being damaged? I'm going to end with some photos that Will Coop took from BC Tapwater Alliance. He was just named a Hidden Hero Award. These photos are, I thought, much too important not to be shared, so I asked his permission to share them with you. Maybe we can turn the lights out for this, please. This is Fox Creek, Alberta, where the world record 4.8 magnitude earthquake happened, caused directly by fracking. The trucks run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most of these are diesel. Benzene is a known carcinogen. The noise is also awful. They buy and propagandize our parks and schools. They buy, bribe, and divide us, our families and communities. And they intentionally contaminate a lot of water. These are water lines. This is up north in northern Alberta, and I'll show you some from British Columbia too. They run for miles. Think of your roads here, your small, small, narrow, beautiful roads with your beautiful stone walls. And over there in England, I couldn't believe how many beautiful cottages are built right along these curvy roads. Think of trucks hauling this water to and from a frac site and then hauling the frac waste out. Water's incredibly heavy. They are hoarding that water for fracking. Many of these dams are illegal. There's been a recent report just released a couple days ago by the energy regulator in British Columbia, finding that some of these dams are a threat. They build these big ponds as well. The Sankana water hose. This is a red truck, actually. It's really weird that the projectors changed the red to blue. Then you've got all these pumps to pump all this water. So think of the energy that's being wasted to move this water with which to frack and refrack and refrack. This is an insane industry. Desperate men, desperate measures. Here's workers with masks. They wear masks. They tell us it's perfectly safe, and we live a few hundred meters away and breathe what is pretty toxic to breathe. Then we have waste pits. This one was leaking by Talisman. Progress Energy owns it now. And it was proven by the regulator to have contaminated groundwater. So another case of fracking directly contaminating groundwater. These are waste pits. I think they put the flagging to keep listed species off these toxic pits. Would you want your workers breathing the fumes coming off of them? Look at the state of the lining. And they're massive. That's Will Coop's truck and tears in the lining. They don't care. This is toxic waste. In this new report, the regulator says that they've been inspecting. If they'd have been inspecting, they would have made them clean this up. There's a truck there. These things are absolutely massive. Massive amounts of water. That pipe is painted bright red. They get that water for free, and there's me going 45 minutes. I have to pay for this little bit of water. After 10 years in the legal system and spending almost $400,000, when you are fracked, there is absolutely no aftercare. The only way you're going to protect your country and each other and your families and communities and roads and air and food and land and water is to not let them in. And you have a great start here. My lawsuit against the water regulator in Enniskillen continue. This is one of my favorite sayings. It's in Japanese. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. I have decided I'm going to keep going, no matter what they do to me next. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. That was obviously very powerful and a lot for us to think about. It's incredible what you've been through and are still going through. Thank you for coming. Questions, anybody, if you'd like to just say it. Well, actually, the microphone is for the camera, so maybe even you still come up and just say it so that we're recording this and hopefully it'll be online at some stage. So if anybody has any questions, please come up, speak it in the microphone, and then we can do it.
This is more a strategy question than anything else. At the moment, we have a new Prime Minister in the south of Ireland, and he's cozying up very much to Macron and also to Trudeau. So not Trudeau, sorry, to the Canadian Prime Minister.
That's Trudeau.
Trudeau, sorry, Trudeau, yeah. Trudeau Jr. But the point I wanted to make was this. Now they seem to be working in a kind of a trio, and they're feeding off one another in terms of marketing, you know, for politics and the likes. So the question I suppose I have is, where does Trudeau stand in all of this? And indeed, where does his environment minister stand? She was here, I gather, recently. Is there anything we can do to kind of frack his image on the basis that, you know, here it's all kind of sweetness and light as far as Canada is concerned at the moment? So that's really my point, or question as well.
Thanks very much. Where does he stand? Yeah, Catherine McKenna, our environment minister, and I had great hopes for Justin Trudeau. I think many of my fellow Canadians did. We are devastated by his continuing the protection of the polluters. Harper brought in a lot of legislation to ruin our freshwater protection in Canada for rivers, and basically allows the frack companies to dump their waste right into our best trout streams and bull trout waterways as well. And Trudeau has not undone those changes. He could easily have done them fairly quickly. To be fair to him and the rest of the ministers and politicians, I think it'll probably take 20 years to undo what Harper did. But I'm not expecting anything to get better. If anything, I think it'll just continue on the way Stephen Harper went, and if not, get worse. I believe we have full-fledged fascism in Canada. I think you have it here in the UK too. I really do. And by fascism, I'm talking about governments that are controlled by corporations. The companies are controlling the courts, the governments, the regulators, the communities, our academics. Our governments are no longer financing our academics. They're cutting funding to libraries. And so the polluters slip in and say, well, we'll give you $40,000 for your libraries. And what happens, or a good example, after I went public with something, and Canada promised $250,000 to the Drumheller new library in exchange for naming rights on the children, youth, and community rooms. So for that tiny bit of money, they get this massive propaganda every time the kids go in and out. That's fascism. And I have not seen, other than maybe Tony McLaughlin here in the South, that took a lot of courage to get that frack ban in. I read the wording. I was absolutely stunned that industry didn't decimate it. They didn't. I can't believe that they weren't able to do that, because that's what they do. So you've got some courageous politicians here, but I don't see any in my country. I don't see any in America.